In the vast and echoing legendarium of Middle-earth, dragons were never mere beasts of flame and wing. What if Tolkien's dragons were never just creatures, but biological weapons engineered for war? In the world imagined by Sir Tolkien, they were not simply towering reptiles that scorched the sky, nor were they the familiar creatures of children's fairy tales. They stood apart. They required no origin story whispered by sages, no fragile justification in dusty tomes. They existed as a given, ancient, undeniable, elemental. And perhaps it was precisely this absence of explanation that made them more perilous than any other being that walked, crawled, or flew across Middle-earth. For in a realm where even the smallest stone carries a lineage, where every race has its awakening and every power its source, dragons alone seem to rise like a question mark carved in fire. But let us, for a moment, draw aside the silver veil of myth. If we dare to examine them not through song and saga, but through the steady lens of inquiry, another question begins to take shape. Tolkien's dragons were cunning. They reasoned, they spoke, they remembered, they calculated, and yet they were also engines of annihilation, living siege weapons whose breath could unmake cities and whose wings cast shadows like falling doom. So what then were they truly? Hello, this is ORCOLOGIST, a devoted student of the beings that dwell at the edge of myth and memory. 1. Why can dragons fly? Let us begin with the image that has burned itself into modern imagination. Smaug rising in flame shadow above the lonely mountain in The Hobbit. The desolation of Smaug. He is colossal, a mountain of muscle and scale, a creature that must weigh many tons, and yet he flies. From the quiet standpoint of biomechanics, this should be nearly impossible. The square cube law tells us that as a body grows larger, its mass increases faster than its wing area. Surface expands by the square. Weight grows by the cube. In theory, a creature of Smaug's immense size should be earthbound, too heavy to lift, too burdened by his own magnificence to leave the ground. And yet, he flies. So we must ask, how? Perhaps the answer lies not in magic alone, but in structure. Consider the ancient pterosaur, the great flying reptile of Earth's distant past. If dragons were, in some imagined evolutionary branch, hybridized from primitive reptiles, then a skeleton engineered for flight would be essential. And here, the comparison becomes intriguing. The pterosaur possessed hollow, honeycomb-like bones, light, yet astonishingly strong. Its elongated fourth finger stretched outward, unfurling a vast membrane of skin into a living sail. When we place a dragon beside a pterosaur, scale against fossil, the resemblance is difficult to ignore. Both are reptilian. Both bear expansive wing membranes supported by elongated limb structures. Both seem designed not merely to crawl, but to claim the sky. And yet, even with hollow bones, a dragon faces another obstacle, the immense weight of its organs and musculature. Flesh is heavy, fire-breathing muscle heavier still. A creature the size of Smaug should struggle to rise. Unless there is something more. A plausible theory emerges when we consider heat. Throughout the legendarium of Sir Tolkien, dragons radiate intense warmth even when not actively breathing flame. When Glaurung crossed the river Teglin, the air trembled, trees withered along the banks, the river itself boiled beneath his breath. When Smaug swept over Lake Town, flames were not required to scorch the air. His very presence brought suffocating heat and rising steam. These are not mere embellishments, they suggest something physiological. What if dragons possess internal air chambers, vast sacs within their bodies capable of superheating air? If that air is heated to a lower density, it would generate buoyancy, much like a hot air balloon. In that moment, the dragon becomes more than muscle and bone. It becomes a living furnace, a scaled zeppelin. As the dragon prepares for flight, its internal thermal reactors awaken. Air within its chambers heats, expands, and lightens. Static lift begins to counter its colossal mass. The wings no longer fight gravity alone. They guide and stabilize a body already partially buoyant. Observe Smaug carefully. He does not flap continuously like a sparrow, nor does he require the relentless forward thrust of a jet. He glides, he hovers, he floats, less like a bird, more like a warship, drifting through heated currents of air. Even his takeoff reveals a logic beneath the spectacle. With such weight, he cannot simply leap skyward like a hawk. Instead, he uses a quadrupedal launch, reminiscent of how some paleontologists believe pterosaurs vaulted into the air. The forelimbs push, the body compresses. Massive chest and shoulder muscles release in a powerful thrust. In the film, his waddling gait may appear almost comical, elbows jutting high when the wings are folded. But scientifically, it provides leverage. That awkward motion becomes mechanical advantage. Once airborne, dragons likely exploit thermal currents, especially those born of their own destruction. Burning forests and towns generate rising columns of hot air. The more fire they unleash, the stronger the convection. The stronger the convection, the higher they soar. Destruction becomes aerodynamics. In The Hobbit, Smaug emerges from the golden halls of Erebor, ascends and perches upon a mountain peak. Such behavior suggests strategy. High places make flight easier. From altitude, potential energy converts into speed. A single glide downward can become a devastating strike. Their scales, too, must be light, perhaps keratin-based, layered like the flexible armor of fish rather than the weight of forged steel. The wing membranes would need to be resilient, heat-resistant, perhaps even self-repairing, a biological fabric stronger than Kevlar, capable of withstanding the inferno of their own breath. Without such adaptations, Smaug would have reduced himself to ash long before Lake Town ever burned. And not all dragons were the same. In the First Age, creatures like Glaurung did not fly. They were engines of war upon the ground, living siege towers, sweeping across battlefields like armored tanks. Their physiology may have differed entirely from the winged dragons of later ages. Different design, different purpose. So what do we conclude? Winged dragons, exemplified by Smaug, may be understood as bioengineered bombers of myth. A pterosaur's skeletal elegance, a zeppelin's buoyant principle, a strategist's use of thermal currents. The more fire they breathe, the stronger the rising heat. The stronger the heat, the higher they climb. Fire fuels flight. Flight fuels devastation. It is a closed and terrible system, elegant in its horror. And now, as the smoke clears from our first inquiry, another question flickers in the dark. If dragons can rise upon heated air, how do they create the fire itself? Do they simply open their jaws and spit flame into the world? 2. Why can dragons breathe fire? If flight yields, however reluctantly, to the laws of physics, then fire, the crowned weapon of Tolkien's dragons, must answer to chemistry. In Middle-earth, dragonfire is not a mere theatrical flame. It is annihilation made visible. Armies crumble beneath it, villages vanish, fortresses melt. When Smaug fell upon Erebor, and later upon Lake Town in The Hobbit, stone blackened, iron ran like water, and steel surrendered to liquid ruin. Dragonfire in Tolkien's world is assumed to be hot enough to consume even the rings of power, except the one. Such heat rivals that of an industrial furnace. And here lies the problem. If a dragon generates temperatures capable of melting iron, how does it survive its own inferno? To simply say, its organs are fireproof, is not an explanation. It is a retreat into convenience. But what if the answer lies in a more elegant mechanism? What if dragons do not burn from within, but ignite from without? Consider the principle of hypergolic combustion, a reaction in which two chemicals ignite instantly upon contact, without the need for a spark. We know that combustion requires oxygen. Suppose then that a dragon's body contains not flame itself, but carefully separated reactive compounds. Imagine two internal sacs, one holding a dense hydrocarbon fuel, the other a powerful oxidizer. These substances remain isolated within the dragon's anatomy, stable yet volatile. Between them lies a mixing chamber, perhaps in the throat. When the dragon prepares to breathe fire, a low growl reverberates through its chest. A hiss escapes between its teeth. Valves open, pressure builds. The two compounds are forced together, and the moment they meet, ignition occurs. The flame is born not inside the dragon's flesh, but just beyond its jaws. In this model, the dragon's body need only endure pressure and chemical exposure, not the full, devastating temperature of the flame itself. Nature, astonishingly, offers a miniature precedent. The bombardier beetle defends itself using two separate chemical chambers, hydroquinone and hydrogen peroxide. When threatened, it mixes them in a reaction chamber, producing a near-boiling explosive spray, nearly 100 degrees Celsius, expelled directly at its attacker. Tolkien's dragon, in this light, becomes a mythic magnification of that principle, a biological rocket engine scaled to apocalyptic proportions. And this brings us to an older mystery, one often dismissed as simple greed. Why do dragons hoard gold? Across Tolkien's legendarium, from Glaurung in the First Age to Smaug in the Third, dragons are irresistibly drawn to treasure. They coil upon it, sleep upon it, guard it with pathological devotion, yet they cannot spend it, they cannot forge with it, they cannot eat it, unless gold serves another purpose. Gold is one of the finest conductors of heat known to humankind. A vast hoard of treasure could function as a thermal reservoir, a heat sink capable of absorbing excess warmth from a dragon's superheated body. Imagine a creature whose metabolism burns like a furnace, whose internal chemistry seethes with volatile compounds. To lie upon gold would not merely be indulgence, it would be regulation, stability, cooling. What appears as avarice may in fact be physiology. Thus, Tolkien's dragons emerge as something extraordinary. A synthesis of spontaneous chemical ignition and biological engineering. Creatures that weaponize combustion while managing their own infernal metabolism through metallic repose. They are not only beasts, they are war machines of flesh and thought, capable of flight, flame, and calculated devastation. One might compare them, in modern terms, to an aerial bomber and a gunship combined, a mythic convergence of mobility and firepower. And yet, if their flame is chemical, if their breath depends upon finite compounds stored within living tissue, then another question rises from the embers. Can a dragon run out of fire? Can even a creature of legend exhaust its ammunition? 3. Do dragons ever run out of ammunition? If dragon fire is a biochemical phenomenon rather than an infinite miracle, then it cannot be limitless. In nature, nothing that depends on chemistry is without constraint. A serpent must regenerate its venom after striking. An athlete must rest to restore ATP to exhausted muscles. Why then should a dragon be any different? If its flame is born of reactive compounds stored within its body, mixed and ignited only as they leave its jaws, then those compounds must be synthesized, stored, and replenished, and synthesis takes time. When Smaug set Lake Town ablaze in The Hobbit, he did not unleash a single, endless torrent of flame. He burned in bursts, calculated, deliberate, devastating bursts. Tolkien himself occasionally described dragonfire as weakening after prolonged devastation. That detail may not be poetic flourish, it may be physiological truth. Fuel depletion, overheating, pressure imbalance. Dragons, in this light, are living chemical factories, and every factory has limits. If we imagine their bodies as biochemical engines, dragonfire becomes the product of two essential components, fuel and ignition. Perhaps vast internal glands secrete volatile organic compounds, methane-like gases, or dense hydrocarbon liquids not unlike napalm. These are stored under pressure, awaiting release. But after a prolonged assault, such as Smaug's destruction of Lake Town, those reservoirs would diminish. The dragon would require immense caloric intake to replenish them. Proteins and fats from livestock, or warriors, would be metabolized and converted into combustible compounds. Consider Smaug's long slumber after the fall of Erebor. It may not have been mere indolence. It may have been recovery, a vast metabolic recalibration, a hibernation not of laziness, but of accumulation. Even the act of breathing fire must generate extreme internal stress. Like a machine gun overheating after sustained fire, a dragon's throat, valves, and chemical sacs would require cooling. If it were to spam flame without restraint, pressure could rise beyond control. Fuel sacs might rupture, internal burns might occur. Even a dragon cannot afford self-destruction. Tolkien's earlier chronicles offer subtle support. In the First Age, dragons such as Glaurung are sometimes described as weary after great ruin, their flames reduced to smouldering heat and smoke, a creature resting, reloading, recovering. And Smaug, too, displayed restraint. He did not waste fire without purpose. Each burst over Lake Town was measured, targeted, tactical, the behavior of a being aware that its arsenal, however terrifying, was finite. Their diet strengthens this theory. After conquering Erebor, Smaug devoured the people of Dale like a wolf among sheep. In time, he hunted livestock from distant lands. He demonstrated the keen senses of a seasoned predator, even detecting the scent of horses carried by the dwarves long after their capture. Horses, rich in calories and muscle, would be ideal fuel for a creature with such extreme metabolic demands. High energy in, combustible chemistry out. Dragons digest not only flesh, but bone and armor, calcium, iron, phosphorus. These minerals could reinforce scale and claw, perhaps even act as catalysts within their fiery glands. Like pythons or crocodiles, after consuming enormous quantities, dragons may enter prolonged states of dormancy, decades, even centuries. During this time, their metabolism slows to an astonishing efficiency, sustaining life while stockpiling chemical potential. So yes, dragons have limits. Smaug does not breathe fire aimlessly. He unleashes it when enraged, when destroying, when asserting dominance. Flame is not casual, it is deliberate, the mark of a predator who understands the cost of every exhalation. And now, having walked through flame and furnace, another question drifts in from colder winds. If the fire drakes burn with internal suns, but what about the cold drakes? Do they spew ice and snow, and are their bodies incredibly cold? Besides flying and breathing fire, what other fearsome weapons do dragons possess? And if dragons are engineered, then who engineered them? We'll find out in another video. For now, goodbye. This is ORCOLOGIST.